Chapter 1. The Unwanted Inheritance. The letter had arrived on Marguerite's 43rd birthday, though no one remembered to mark the occasion. She sat alone in the narrow parlor of her brother's townhouse, the parchment trembling between her fingers. The solicitor's words blurred and sharpened. Sole beneficiary. Blackthorn estate. Immediate occupancy required. Her great-aunt Vivian, a woman she'd met only twice in childhood, had left her everything. "You cannot seriously be considering this," her sister-in-law Constance said from the doorway, her voice sharp as winter frost. "A woman of your age, traveling alone to that god-forsaken corner of the countryside? It's unseemly." Marguerite folded the letter carefully, her movements precise despite the tremor in her hands. At 43, she had learned to make herself small, unobtrusive. The spinster aunt who helped with the children, who darned socks in the evening, who never complained about the cramped room beneath the stairs. "The estate requires a resident," she said quietly. "The terms are clear." Constance's laugh was brittle. "You think yourself capable of managing property? My dear Marguerite, you are past the age of new beginnings. This is likely some crumbling ruin, and you'll be back within a fortnight, begging for your old room. Too old. Too plain. Too late." The words had followed Marguerite through decades like a funeral procession. She had watched her youth slip away while caring for her ailing mother, then her father, then finding herself deposited in her brother's household like an unwanted piece of furniture. The world had decided her story was finished before it had properly begun. But something in that letter, something in the formal, antiquated script, whispered of a different truth. She left London 3 days later as autumn's first frost silvered the cobblestones. The coach journey took 2 days, each mile carrying her further from everything familiar. The landscape transformed around her, manicured parks giving way to wild moorland, villages growing sparse and strange. By the time she glimpsed Blackthorn Estate through the carriage window, twilight had turned the sky to bruised purple. The house rose from the hillside like a monument to forgotten elegance. All Gothic spires and weathered stone, windows like dark eyes watching her approach. Ivy claimed the western wall in a possessive embrace. The gardens had long since surrendered to wildness. It was the most beautiful thing Marguerite had ever seen. The coach driver refused to stay, pressing the keys into her hand and departing with unseemly haste. She stood alone in the circular drive, her single trunk at her feet, and felt something shift inside her chest. Not hope. She had learned better than hope. But perhaps its quieter cousin. Possibility. The front door opened before she could raise the knocker. The man who stood in the threshold was not a servant. Marguerite knew this instantly, though she could not have explained how. He was tall, his frame suggesting strength held in careful restraint. His face was too perfect to be real, sculpted planes and elegant bones that belonged to cathedral statuary, not living flesh. Dark hair fell past his collar. His eyes were the color of smoke and storm clouds, and they looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You came," he said. His voice was low, rough, as if he had not spoken in some time, as if her arrival had pulled him from profound silence. Yes." Marguerite straightened her spine, reaching for the dignity that had sustained her through years of dismissal. "I am Marguerite Ashford. This estate was left to me by my great-aunt." "I know who you are." He stepped back, a gesture of invitation that seemed to cost him effort. "I have been waiting." The entrance hall swallowed her whole, all soaring ceilings and dark wood paneling, lit by candles that must have been placed in anticipation of her arrival. Dust sheets covered furniture like sleeping ghosts. The air smelled of old roses and something else, something metallic and strange that made the hair rise on her arms. "Waiting?" she echoed. "I don't understand." "Are you the estate manager?" Something that might have been pain flickered across his extraordinary face. I am Lucian Ashford. I am your great-aunt's husband. Marguerite's mind stumbled over the words. That's impossible. Aunt Vivian was 91 when she died. You cannot be more than 37, he said softly. I have been 37 for a very long time. The candles guttered, though there was no wind. Marguerite should have been afraid. Every rational instinct screamed that she should flee this house, this man, this situation that made no earthly sense. But she had spent 43 years being sensible and small and invisible. And he was looking at her as if she were the only real thing in the world. The terms of the inheritance, Lucian continued, his gaze never leaving hers, require more than residency. They require a covenant. Your great-aunt understood certain truths about this house, about me. He moved closer, and she noticed that his footsteps made no sound. She bound me with her presence. Without that binding, I am dangerous. Dangerous, Marguerite repeated. The word should have terrified her. Instead, it illuminated something she had sensed from the moment she saw him. The rigid control, the careful distance, the way he held himself like a blade kept sheathed. You should leave, he said, but his eyes told a different story. You should return to London and forget this place exists. They were right about you. You deserve more than this darkness. They? Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Whoever told you that you were too old? Lucian said quietly, and there was something terrible and tender in his expression. Too late, too plain. I can smell the words on you. Years of them, like scars. Marguerite's breath stopped. No one had ever seen her so clearly. But they were wrong, he whispered, and his voice cracked like breaking stone. You are perfect. The candles flared bright, then dimmed. Somewhere in the depths of the house, something that might have been music or might have been weeping drifted through the halls, and Marguerite understood that she had not inherited a house. She had inherited a curse, a covenant, and a creature who looked at her as if she were salvation itself. Chapter 2. The Covenant of Silence. Marguerite did not sleep that first night. Lucian had shown her to a bedroom in the eastern wing, a vast chamber with midnight blue curtains and furniture carved from dark walnut. The bed was soft, the linen smelled of lavender, and every civilized instinct insisted she should rest after her journey. But how could one sleep knowing that downstairs, in the shadows of this strange house, something impossible waited? She sat by the window and watched moonlight silver the overgrown gardens. Her great-aunt Vivian had lived here for 70 years, married to a man who claimed to have been 37 for a very long time. The mathematics alone defied reason. Yet Marguerite had seen his eyes, ancient and weary and desperately controlled. She had heard the truth in his voice when he called her perfect. As dawn broke pale and cold across the moors, she descended the grand staircase. The house felt different in daylight, less Gothic nightmare and more melancholy museum. Dust motes danced in the thin morning light. Portraits lined the walls, stern-faced Ashford spanning centuries, all with those same striking features. She found Lucian in the library. He stood before the eastern window, positioned where the sunlight could not quite reach him. He had not changed his clothes, the same dark jacket, the same white shirt. He looked exactly as he had the previous night, beautiful and still as carved marble. You stayed, he said without turning. Where else would I go? Marguerite moved among the shelves, trailing her fingers across leather spines. My brother has already let my room to a lodger. I received a letter this morning. Constance wasted no time. They would take you back if you asked. Perhaps. She pulled down a volume, some Gothic novel from 50 years past, and opened it at random. But I find I am tired of asking. of making myself convenient, of apologizing for existing. Now he did turn, and the intensity of his regard made her pulse quicken. You should not have to apologize. No, she agreed quietly. I should not. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable. Marguerite continued browsing, aware of his presence like heat from a distant fire. Finally, he spoke again. Your great-aunt came here much as you did, Lucien said. Young, 21, jilted by a man who found her fortune insufficient. She answered an advertisement I had placed, seeking companionship, a marriage of convenience. His laugh was bitter. I did not tell her what I was until the wedding night. Marguerite's hand stilled on the books. What are you? Names vary across centuries. Vampire, Nosferatu, the Undying. He moved along the perimeter of the sunlight, never crossing that fatal boundary. I was made in 1647, a Swedish battlefield. I was a soldier, dying in the mud. Something found me, offered a choice that was not truly a choice. And Aunt Vivienne was braver than I deserved. His voice softened with old grief. She learned the truth and did not flee. She established the covenant, a binding that kept my hunger contained. Her presence in the house created a barrier. As long as she lived here, I could not hunt, could not kill. I survived on animal blood and her willingness to occasionally... He stopped, swallowed. She saved me from myself. Marguerite processed this carefully, her logical mind struggling against impossible facts. And now she is gone. Now the covenant is broken. Lucien finally met her eyes fully, and she saw the desperation there. I can feel it fraying, the control I have maintained for decades. Without the binding, I will become what I was made to be, a monster. Is that why the inheritance required my presence? Vivienne was clever. She knew I would not survive her death, not with my sanity intact. She searched your family line for someone with the bloodline, the temperament, He hesitated. The loneliness. Forgive me. But the covenant requires genuine residency. Someone who would stay not from duty but from having nowhere else they wish to be. The words should have stung. Instead, they rang with uncomfortable truth. What does the covenant require? Marguerite asked. Presence. Proximity. Lucien's hands clenched at his sides. And eventually, trust. A willing exchange, freely given. Vivienne would let me take small amounts of her blood. Enough to sustain me, to strengthen the binding. But that was after years. After she knew me, I do not expect... How long do you have? She interrupted. Before you lose control? His jaw tightened. Weeks, perhaps a month. Marguerite closed the Gothic novel and returned it to its shelf. She thought of her life in London, the narrow bed, the endless darning, the way Constance's children had learned to look through her as if she were furniture. She thought of the decades stretching ahead, each year making her more invisible, more unnecessary. She thought of how Lucien had looked at her last night, like she mattered, like she was real. I will stay, she said. Marguerite. I will stay, she repeated, turning to face him fully. Not because I have nowhere to go, because I choose this. Because for once in my life, I want to matter to someone. The expression that crossed his face was too complex to name, hope and horror, and something desperately grateful. You matter, he said hoarsely. You walked into this house and the shadows pulled back. When Vivienne died, this place became a tomb. Then you arrived, and I could breathe again. The morning light crept further into the room, and Lucien retreated another step. But his eyes never left hers. I will not touch you, he said. I will not ask for the blood binding. You will live here safely, and I will... Lucien? His name felt strange and intimate on her tongue. We will find a way. Together. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 7 times, each note falling through the silence like a promise or a warning. And in the shadows beyond the sunlight's reach, the vampire king who had called her perfect stood very still, as if afraid that moving might shatter whatever fragile magic had just been wrought between them. Chapter 3: The Language of Silence. Days passed in strange, careful rhythm. Marguerite established routines: breakfast in the morning room, afternoons exploring the overgrown gardens, evenings in the library where Lucien would appear at dusk like a conjured shadow. They did not speak of covenants or blood or the deteriorating control he maintained with visible effort. Instead, they spoke of everything else. She learned that he had been a scholar before the battlefield claimed him, that he spoke 7 languages, that he had watched the world transform through 4 centuries with the weary detachment of someone who no longer felt part of it. He was gentle when discussing history, bitter when mentioning the early decades after his turning, carefully neutral when speaking of Vivienne. She was kind, he said one evening, standing in his customary position by the darkened window. Patient, but she never loved me. It was a transaction, her presence for my restraint. Companionship without intimacy. I was grateful for it. Marguerite looked up from the household ledgers she'd been examining. Were you lonely? The question clearly startled him. I had forfeited the right to such feelings. That is not an answer. His smile was sad and slight. Yes, I was unspeakably lonely. She understood loneliness. It had been her constant companion through decades of invisibility. But her loneliness had been born of being overlooked, his from being too dangerous to approach. What happened to you? She asked softly. In the beginning? Lucien was quiet for so long she thought he would not answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was distant, detached, the tone of someone recounting another person's nightmare. I woke in a mass grave, covered in bodies, starving. The hunger was indescribable. I did terrible things. His hands gripped the window frame. For 20 years I was a creature of pure instinct. Then I killed a child, and something in me broke. I fled to the remotest places I could find, learned to survive on animals, eventually purchased this estate, far enough from civilization that I could hide. And Vivienne found you. I had placed an advertisement, desperate for any human presence that might anchor me. She responded. A practical arrangement. He turned slightly, candlelight catching the sharp planes of his face. She kept me sane for 70 years. And now? He stopped, swallowed hard. Marguerite saw his hands tremble before he clenched them into fists. The hunger is worse tonight? She said, not a question. Yes. She set the ledgers aside and stood. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her voice remained steady. Then we should address it. No. The word came out harsh, desperate. I will not. Lucien, look at me. He did, and she saw the animal desperation beneath his careful control. His eyes had darkened, the pupils dilated. A muscle jumped in his jaw. If we wait until you are beyond control, Marguerite said quietly, the first binding will be violent, frightening. Yes? His silence was confirmation. But if we begin now, while you still have restraint? She moved closer, each step deliberate. It could be different, gentle. A choice we both make consciously. You do not understand what you are offering. His voice had dropped to a rough whisper. The blood binding is intimate, more intimate than... He stopped, jaw clenched. It will connect us. You will feel what I feel, and I will know you. Every secret, every hidden part of your soul. Marguerite thought of her gray, small life, of the years spent being invisible, unnecessary, decorously silent, of how Lucian looked at her as if she were miraculous. "Perhaps," she said softly, "I want to be known." The confession hung between them like something precious and dangerous. Lucian stood utterly still, only his chest rising and falling with unnecessary breaths. A habit from life, she realized, not a need. "I am an old woman," she continued, "because the truth demanded speaking. Past 40, plain, unremarkable in every way. No one has ever looked at me as you do. No one has ever called me perfect. If this binding means you will know me completely—" She met his storm-gray eyes. "Then you will also know that I have never felt more alive than in these past few days, that I would rather matter to you for whatever time remains than return to being invisible." "You think yourself old?" Lucian's voice carried something between wonder and pain. "Marguerite, you are mortal and beautiful and blazing with life. You are everything I am not. Being near you is like standing at the edge of sunlight. It burns, but God, the warmth." He had moved closer without her noticing. They stood now with barely a foot between them, the air charged with possibility and danger. "I would be gentle," he said hoarsely. "I would make it as painless as possible. But I cannot guarantee. If we do this, there is no reversing it. The binding is permanent. You would be tied to me until—" He did not finish. "Until death. Her death. Because his would not come." "I understand," Marguerite said. "Do you?" His hand rose as if to touch her face, then fell. "In 70 years, Vivian gave blood perhaps a dozen times. Only when absolutely necessary. She knew me, yes, but she never—" His voice cracked. "She never wanted to. It was duty. Clinical. I will not have you hate me for this." Marguerite did something then that surprised them both. She took his hand, the one that had risen and fallen, and pressed it to her cheek. His skin was cool, smooth, and his entire body went rigid. "I do not think," she whispered, "that I could hate you." The grandfather clock struck midnight. Somewhere in the house, floorboards creaked, the candles flickered wildly, and Lucian, the broken vampire king who had endured 4 centuries of loneliness, looked at the woman who had been told she was too old for love and made a decision that would bind them both to an uncertain fate. "Tomorrow night," he said softly, "I will explain everything, and if you still consent, we will forge the covenant." Chapter 4. Blood Moon Rising. Marguerite spent the following day in a state of crystalline awareness. Every task took on heightened significance. The breakfast she might not taste the same way after the binding, the garden walk where sunlight felt particularly precious, the afternoon spent sorting through Aunt Vivian's personal effects in the East bedroom. She found the journals tucked in a cedar chest. 70 years of careful documentation. May 3rd, 1813, the binding is complete. Lucian took only what was necessary. The sensation was not unpleasant. Intimate in a way I had not anticipated. But I must maintain boundaries. This is an arrangement, nothing more. October 17th, 1829, 16 years, and still he looks at me sometimes with such longing. I pretend not to notice. I cannot give him what he wants. My affection is real. But love? I buried that capacity when Charles jilted me. It is safer this way. December 25th, 1851. He played the pianoforte tonight. Beethoven, flawlessly. I watched his hands and thought, not for the first time, how lonely immortality must be. How lonely we both are, together in this great house, bound by covenant but separated by the simple fact that I cannot love him as he deserves. Marguerite's hands trembled as she closed the journal. Vivian had cared for Lucian but never loved him. 70 years of companionship without intimacy, duty without devotion. And he had endured it, grateful simply to have someone who did not flee. She was honest at least, Lucian said from the doorway. Marguerite turned, startled. In the afternoon light filtering through curtains, he looked like a ghost, beautiful and insubstantial. He did not enter the sunlit room. I did not mean to pry, she said. You are mistress of this house. Everything here is yours to discover. He leaned against the doorframe, carefully casual. Vivienne never hid her journals. I think she wanted me to understand that what we had was all I should expect. Did you love her? The question emerged before Marguerite could stop it. Lucian's expression shifted. Surprise, then something more complicated. I loved what she represented, he said slowly. Salvation, sanity, human connection. But love in the romantic sense? He shook his head. She did not want that, and I learned not to want what I could not have. And now? Now, he said quietly, I am terrified. His honesty struck her breathless. Of the binding? Of what I feel when I look at you? Lucian's eyes met hers across the sunlit threshold. Vivienne was safety. You are dangerous. You make me want things I have not permitted myself to want in centuries. Marguerite's pulse fluttered. What things? To be seen. Known. Perhaps even... He stopped, jaw tight. Forgiven. The word hung in the air between them, weighted with 400 years of guilt. There is nothing to forgive, Marguerite said softly. There is everything to forgive. His voice turned harsh. I have killed. Marguerite, in the early years before control, I was a monster. Even now, the hunger whispers such dark things. You have not acted on those whispers, only because of the covenant, without it. But you had already fought your way to control before Vivienne, Marguerite interrupted, moving to the edge of the sunlight. You sought her out. You placed that advertisement because you wanted to be better. That was you, Lucian, not the covenant. You. He stared at her as if she had spoken in tongues. You make it sound noble. It was desperation. Perhaps desperation is the beginning of nobility. She folded Vivienne's journal carefully. Perhaps choosing to fight yourself every day for decades, for centuries, is the most noble thing possible. You see me through two kind eyes. I see you clearly, Marguerite said. And tonight, when we complete the binding, you will see me clearly as well. All the small, petty, foolish parts of me, all the bitterness I have pretended not to feel, all the longing I have convinced myself I was too old to experience. She met his gaze steadily. And I am more afraid of that than of any physical pain. Understanding flickered across his features. You think I will find you wanting. I think you will see what everyone else has seen. A plain, aging woman who should be grateful for any attention, even from... Stop. The command was soft, but absolute. Lucian moved to the very edge of the shadow, as close to the sunlight as he dared. When I look at you, I see courage, intelligence, a woman who has survived decades of being diminished and yet retained her kindness. Your face reflects your character. Strength in the set of your jaw. Wisdom in your eyes. Grace in your bearing. His voice dropped. And when I take your blood tonight, I will taste all of that. The binding does not lie, Marguerite. I will know your soul. And I already know it will be beautiful. Tears pricked her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. She blinked them back. You cannot know that. I know that you stayed, that you walked into this cursed house and chose to see possibility instead of horror. I know that you hold my hand without flinching and call me by name as if I am still human. He smiled, sad and slight. I know that you are braver than you believe. And tonight, you will feel my certainty. The binding works both ways. You will know exactly what I see when I look at you. The clock in the hall struck 5. Twilight would come soon, and with it, the blood moon Lucian had mentioned, a rare celestial alignment that would make the binding stronger, more complete, more irreversible. I should prepare, Marguerite said softly. As should I. Lucian stepped back into shadow. We will meet in the library at moonrise. And Marguerite? He waited until she looked at him. Thank you. For choosing this. For choosing me. He vanished into the darkened hallway before she could respond. Marguerite stood alone in Aunt Vivienne's sunlit room, holding journals that documented 70 years of careful distance, and wondered what her own journals might record after tonight. If she would write of duty and boundaries, or of something far more dangerous. Chapter 5. The Taste of Truth. The library had been transformed. Candles covered every surface, hundreds of them, their flames casting dancing shadows across the book-lined walls. The furniture had been pushed back, creating a circular space in the center of the room. A settee upholstered in midnight velvet sat within that circle, positioned before the great window where the blood moon rose like a warning. Lucian stood waiting, dressed in black, his pale skin luminous in the candlelight. He looked like something from a Gothic painting. Beautiful and terrible and utterly inhuman. Marguerite's courage wavered. We do not have to do this, he said immediately, reading her hesitation. You can live here without the binding. I will find another way to... No. She entered the library, closing the door behind her. I want this. She wore a simple white nightdress beneath her robe, practical, modest, but something in Lucian's expression shifted when he saw her. His eyes darkened, pupils dilating. You look like a bride, he said hoarsely. The comparison sent heat through her chest. Perhaps I am. Marrying myself to this house, to this covenant. To me, he corrected quietly. Make no mistake, Marguerite. After tonight, you will be bound to me specifically. If I am destroyed, the bond breaks. If you die... He stopped, swallowed. I prefer not to consider that possibility. She moved to the settee and sat, hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. Explain what will happen. Lucian approached slowly, movements controlled and deliberate. He knelt before her, an oddly courtly gesture, so their eyes were level. I will need to feed from your wrist or throat, he began, voice clinical despite the tension in his frame. The throat is more traditional, more intimate, but the wrist is... The throat, Marguerite said. His eyes widened. You do not have to... I trust you. The words emerged simpler than she expected. And I do not want to begin this bond with fear. The throat, Lucian. He looked at her for a long moment, something like awe in his expression. Then he nodded and moved to sit beside her on the settee. The proximity made her acutely aware of him, the coolness of his skin, the subtle scent of old paper and night air that clung to him. During the feeding, he continued, you will feel the binding take hold. Our emotions will begin to blur. You will sense what I feel. The hunger, yes, but also everything beneath it. And I will sense you with equal clarity. There is no hiding in a blood bond, Marguerite. No pretense survives. Good, she whispered. I am tired of pretense. When it is complete, we will be able to sense each other always. Not thoughts, but emotions. Presence. If you are in danger, I will know. If I am losing control, you will feel it. His hand rose, hovering near her face. And the covenant will anchor me. Your willingness, freely given, will create the binding that keeps the monster caged. You are not a monster. You will know the truth of that very soon. His fingers finally brushed her cheek, cool and careful. Last chance to flee, brave Marguerite. Instead of answering, she turned her head, exposing the line of her throat. Lucian's breath caught, An unnecessary human response. His hand slid to cup her jaw, thumb tracing the pulse that fluttered beneath her skin. She felt him tremble. "I have not done this with care in so long," he murmured. Vivienne would sit in a chair, turn her head, and endure. "But you—" His voice roughed. "I want this to be more than endurance." "Then make it more," Marguerite said. He moved closer, and she felt the brush of his hair against her cheek, the cool press of his body against her side. His breath ghosted across her throat. Unnecessary, theatrical, but it made her shiver. "Forgive me," he whispered. Then his lips pressed to her pulse point, gentle as a kiss. For a moment that was all, just the careful pressure, the intimacy of being so close. Then she felt the sharp, clean pain of his teeth breaking skin. Marguerite gasped, but the pain faded almost instantly, replaced by something else. Warmth spread from the wound, liquid and strange, and with it came the sensation of otherness flooding her awareness. She felt Lucien's hunger, yes, the terrible, gnawing need that had haunted him for centuries. But beneath it, she felt everything else: his loneliness, vast and aching, his guilt, heavy as stones, his desperate fear that even now, even with her willingness, he was taking something precious and ruining it. And underneath all of that, tender and terrified and achingly present, she felt his wonder at her. The way he perceived her not as old or plain but as blazing, vital, extraordinary. She felt herself through his senses, the taste of her blood like sunlight in summer, the sound of her heartbeat like music, the scent of her skin like hope itself. "You are perfect," his emotions whispered. "You are saving me again with every heartbeat." Tears slipped down Marguerite's cheeks, not from pain, but from the overwhelming recognition of being truly, completely seen. And she sensed him feeling her tears, feeling her realization, and his guilt surged. "I am taking too much, hurting her. I should stop." "No," she whispered aloud, her hand rising to tangle in his dark hair. "Do not stop. I am not hurt. I am. She could not find words. So she let the bond carry her emotions to him. Her joy at being known, her relief at finally mattering, her amazement that this impossible creature found her beautiful. Lucien made a sound against her throat, half sob, half something else. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her close as he drank, not desperately, but reverently, as if she were something sacred. The blood moon climbed higher, its red light spilling through the window. The candles burned lower. And in the library of the cursed house, the covenant sealed itself with blood and truth, and an intimacy neither of them had expected. When Lucien finally pulled back, his lips stained crimson, his eyes bright with unshed tears, Marguerite felt the bond settle into place like a key turning in a lock. "I feel you," she whispered, awed. Even now, with space between them, she sensed his presence in her mind like a steady flame. "As I feel you." His voice was wrecked. "Marguerite, you are—" She pressed her fingers to his lips. "I know. I can feel what you think of me now. No more arguments?" He kissed her fingers, reverent and desperate, and the bond thrummed between them like a living thing. Chapter 6. The Unraveling. The days following the binding passed in strange, heightened awareness. Marguerite woke each morning to the sensation of Lucien's presence humming at the edge of her consciousness, a steady warmth that told her he was safe, contained, present. She would rise, dress, take breakfast, and throughout it all, she felt the echo of his emotions: contentment when she was near, carefully controlled hunger as dusk approached, and beneath everything, a constant aching tenderness directed at her. It was overwhelming and addictive in equal measure. "You are distracting," Lucien said one evening, not looking up from the book he pretended to read. They sat in the library, Marguerite reviewing estate correspondence while he occupied his customary position by the window. I have not moved in 20 minutes. That is not the distraction I mean. He finally looked at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. I can feel your contentment, your peace. It is intoxicating. Marguerite set down her pen. Is that uncomfortable? No. He closed his book carefully. It is dangerously pleasant. For centuries, the only emotions I experienced were my own, hunger and guilt in endless rotation. Now I feel your joy when sunlight hits the garden just right. Your amusement when the housekeeper we hired made that terrible joke about the West Wing being haunted. He stopped, jaw tight. Your affection. Heat crept up her neck. I cannot hide it. I would not want you to. He moved from the window, approaching with that predatory grace that still sometimes startled her. But Marguerite, you must understand, I have not been the recipient of genuine affection in so long that I hardly know what to do with it. What do you want to do with it? The question hung between them, weighted with possibility. Lucien stopped a careful distance away, hands clenched at his sides. I want to court you, he said quietly, properly, as if I were still human and you were the most extraordinary woman I had ever encountered, which you are. I want to give you poetry and music and every beautiful thing I have hoarded through centuries. His voice dropped. I want to touch you without fearing I will break you, kiss you without worrying my nature will frighten you, but we have already bound ourselves through blood. The courtship should have come first. Marguerite stood, her heart hammering. Then court me now. It is backwards. We have already established we are doing everything backwards. She moved closer, emboldened by the bond that let her feel his desire, his fear, his desperate hope. I am 43, bound by blood to a vampire, living in a Gothic estate, managing a covenant. Nothing about this is conventional. Why should courtship be? You deserve conventional, Lucien said. You deserve flowers and dances and some proper gentleman who— I had decades to find a proper gentleman, Marguerite interrupted. They all looked past me, through me. You are the only person who has ever truly seen me, Lucien. If that is unconventional, then I will take unconventional gratefully. He stared at her, emotions warring across his face. Through the bond, she felt his control cracking, not into violence, but into something equally dangerous— vulnerability. Play for me, she said suddenly. Vivian wrote that you played the pianoforte beautifully. The request surprised him. Now? Now. Court me with music, since you cannot yet court me with touch. Something in his expression softened. He crossed to the pianoforte in the corner, an instrument she had not heard played since arriving, and settled onto the bench. His hands hovered over the keys for a moment, then began to move. The music that filled the library was achingly beautiful. Chopin, she thought, though she could not name the specific piece. Lucien played with the skill of centuries of practice, but also with raw emotion that the bond amplified. She felt what he poured into the music, longing and devotion and carefully contained need. This was courtship for a creature who could not walk in sunlight or offer her a normal life. This was his declaration, wordless and profound. When the final notes faded, Marguerite found she was crying. Did I upset you? Lucien asked immediately, rising. No. She crossed to him, to the pianoforte, and did something she had not permitted herself before. She reached out and took his hand, lacing their fingers together. You made me feel treasured. Is that not the point of courtship? His cool fingers tightened on hers. Marguerite. Kiss me, she whispered. He went very still. The binding is barely a week old. We should not. The binding means I can feel that you want to. She looked up at him, this impossible, beautiful creature who had called her perfect. And you can feel that I am not afraid. Kiss me, Lucian. Court me unconventionally. For a moment she thought he would refuse. Then, slowly, he raised his free hand to cup her face. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, tender and reverent. I am going to ruin you, he said softly. You know that, yes? After this, you will never be satisfied with half measures or polite distance. I have waited too long, wanted too much. When I finally allow myself to have you, I am already ruined, Marguerite interrupted. I have tasted your emotions through the bond. I know how you see me. How could I ever settle for someone who does not perceive me as you do? His laugh was pained and helpless. Then we are both ruined. He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to retreat. But Marguerite had spent 43 years retreating. She rose on her toes and closed the distance herself. The kiss was soft at first, almost chaste, just the careful press of his cool lips against hers. But then the bond flared between them, emotions flooding back and forth, and the kiss deepened. His hand slid into her hair. Her fingers clutched his jacket. The control he had maintained so carefully began to fray, and she felt his desire crash over her in waves. Centuries of denial breaking against the reality of her willing presence. When they finally broke apart, both trembling, Marguerite understood what Lucian had tried to warn her about. This was not a gentle courtship. This was the beginning of an obsession that would consume them both. Chapter 7. The Blood Price. The vampire hunters arrived on a rain-swept October night. Marguerite woke to Lucian's terror flooding the bond, sharp and primal and utterly unlike him. She threw on her robe and ran downstairs to find him in the entrance hall, standing between her and 3 men in dark cloaks. Stay back, Lucian commanded, not looking at her. His voice carried a dangerous edge she had never heard before. The lead hunter, a gray-haired man with a silver crucifix, smiled coldly. The creature knows what we are. This is my home, Marguerite said, forcing her voice steady despite the fear crawling up her spine. You have no right. We have every right. The hunter pulled a scroll from his cloak. Lucian Ashford, called the Blackthorn Vampire, is named in the Covenant of Shadows. He has lived beyond his natural span, consumed human blood, and corrupted this bloodline. The Order demands his destruction. He has harmed no one, Marguerite protested. He is vampire. That is harm enough. The hunter's eyes flicked to her throat, to the faint marks from the binding. And he has infected you, madam. You would defend your murderer. He is not— Marguerite, please. Lucian's control was fracturing. She felt it through the bond. Go upstairs. Lock yourself in your chamber. They will not harm you if you— I will not leave you. They have holy weapons. I cannot fight them without— He stopped, and she felt the terrible calculation running through his mind, without losing control, without becoming the monster. The hunters advanced. What happened next occurred in heartbeats. The gray-haired man pulled a wooden stake. Another produced a vial of what smelled like blessed water. Lucian moved with inhuman speed, placing himself between Marguerite and the threat. But she felt his restraint. The covenant held even now, even with death approaching, because she was present, and the binding demanded control. He could not fully defend himself without breaking the covenant. The realization struck her like lightning. Lucienne, she said urgently, listen to me. No, I will not risk you. The covenant binds you to restraint in my presence. Her mind raced. But I can release you. Temporarily. If I give permission. Marguerite, no. Then you are not breaking the covenant. You are following my will. She grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. I give you permission to defend yourself, to defend us both. Do you understand? His eyes widened. That is not how— It is exactly how it works. She felt the truth of it singing through the bond. I am mistress of this house. You are bound to me. And I am ordering you to survive. The lead hunter lunged. Lucien moved. And the covenant bent. Marguerite felt it through the bond. The binding recognizing her command, her will, her absolute certainty that Lucien's survival was necessary. The restraint loosened not into chaos but into directed purpose. He caught the stake mid-strike, crushed it to splinters, and moved with lethal precision. It was over in moments. The hunters fled, dragging their injured leader, shouting threats about return and reinforcement. Lucien stood in the doorway, breathing hard despite not needing breath, and slowly the killing edge faded from his posture. He turned to her, expression devastated. I could have killed them, he whispered. I wanted to. You felt it. I felt you show restraint even when given permission for violence. Marguerite crossed to him, taking his trembling hands. You disarmed them, frightened them, but you did not kill. Only because you were here, watching, trusting me. He pulled his hands away, backing up. Marguerite, you took a terrible risk. If I had lost control, but you did not. This time, his voice broke. They will return. The order does not abandon a hunt. And next time there will be more of them, better prepared. And I do not know if I can. Then we leave, Marguerite said simply. He stared at her. What? We leave. This house, this estate. We travel somewhere the order cannot find us. She spoke quickly, plans forming. You have centuries of resources, yes? Hidden wealth? We can disappear. You would give up your inheritance? The first home you have ever truly owned? I would give up everything to keep you alive. The words emerged with complete certainty. The house is not what matters, Lucien. You are what matters. The emotion that crashed through the bond was overwhelming. Disbelief and desperate hope, and a love so profound it stole her breath. He had not spoken the word, had not allowed himself to even think it clearly, but she felt it now in every corner of his being. He loved her, desperately, entirely. I do not deserve you, he said hoarsely. That is not your decision. She closed the distance between them, cupping his face in her hands. I am choosing this. Choosing you. Choosing a life where I matter more than property or propriety or safety. Do you understand? You are remarkable. He leaned into her touch, eyes closing. Brave and foolish and utterly remarkable. Then we are well matched. His laugh was pained. Yes, I suppose we are. Through the broken doorway, rain poured down. Dawn was still hours away. They had time to plan, to pack, to prepare for the exile that would keep them both alive. But first, Lucien opened his eyes and looked at her with such naked devotion that Marguerite felt her heart crack open. I love you, he said quietly. I have loved you since you stood in this hallway and saw a monster and chose to stay. I will love you until your mortal span ends, and then I will carry that love through whatever eternity remains. His thumb brushed her cheek. You have saved me in every way a person can be saved. Then we are even, Marguerite whispered, tears streaming. Because you saved me first. He kissed her then, desperate and tender and full of promises they would spend the coming years learning to keep. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, the vampire and his covenant bride held each other and planned their escape into an uncertain, extraordinary future. Chapter 8. The Flight. They fled Blackthorn Estate under cover of the new moon. Lucien moved with centuries of practiced efficiency, packing only essentials. Documents proving his various identities, carefully sealed containers of emergency provisions, a single leather journal. Marguerite took less: clothes, Aunt Vivienne's journals, and a miniature portrait of Lucien she'd found in the library, painted centuries ago when he'd still been human. "We make for Scotland first," Lucian said as they loaded a discreet carriage. "I have a property there. Remote. Defensible. From there we can assess the Order's movements." "Will they truly pursue us so far?" His expression was grim. "The Order has hunted me for 200 years. They lost my trail when I married Vivian, but now—" He touched her face gently. "Now I have given them leverage. They know you matter to me. That makes you a target." The thought should have terrified her. Instead, Marguerite felt a strange, fierce satisfaction. Someone considered her important enough to be leverage. After a lifetime of being overlooked, the danger felt almost validating. "You are extraordinary," Lucian murmured, clearly sensing her emotions through the bond. They traveled through the night, Lucian driving with inhuman endurance while Marguerite dozed fitfully in the carriage. She woke at dawn to find they had stopped in a dense forest, the carriage hidden among ancient oaks. "We rest here during daylight," Lucian explained. He looked tired, truly tired, in a way she had not seen before. "The Covenant sustains me, but the confrontation drained reserves. I need—" He hesitated. "I may need to feed again. Soon." Marguerite understood. "Tonight? If you are willing." "Always." She touched his hand. "We are in this together, Lucian." They spent the day in the shadowed carriage, speaking softly of practicalities. How long until they reached Scotland? What supplies they needed? Contingency plans if the Order caught their trail. But beneath the practical discussion, emotions swirled through the bond, his protectiveness, her determination, and the growing certainty that they had become essential to each other's survival. As dusk fell, Lucian fed from her wrist this time, a quicker, more practical exchange than the binding had been, but still intimate. Marguerite felt his strength return, felt his gratitude and love flowing through the connection. "I will keep you safe," he promised against her skin. "Whatever it takes." "And I will keep you sane," she replied. "Whatever it takes." They continued north. Scotland's borderlands greeted them with mist and rugged beauty. Lucian's property was a stone tower house nestled in the highlands, ancient, solid, with walls thick enough to withstand siege. "I won it in a card game in 1702, he explained as they approached. "The previous owner claimed it was cursed. I found it rather charming." The interior was sparse but clean. Someone had maintained it over the centuries. A caretaker, perhaps, paid through anonymous accounts. Marguerite wandered through rooms that smelled of stone and heather and felt something settle in her chest. "We could be happy here," she said. Lucian appeared behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. The gesture was becoming natural, this easy intimacy that would have been scandalous in London but here, in their exile, felt simply right. "We could," he agreed, "for a time, until the Order finds us again. And then we run again." He turned her in his arms, expression serious. "Marguerite, you must understand. This will be our life now. Running, hiding, always looking over our shoulders. I can offer you immortality through the bond, but I cannot offer you peace." She had thought about this during their flight. The bond was already changing her. She felt stronger, aged more slowly, healed faster. Eventually, with deeper bindings, she might stop aging entirely, might walk beside him for centuries. "I do not want peace," she said. "I want you. If that means running, then we run." His kiss was answer enough. They settled into strange domesticity. Days spent reinforcing the tower's defenses, nights spent in each other's arms. Lucian taught her the things he had learned across centuries: languages, history, the hidden world of immortals that existed in shadows. Marguerite brought practicality and planning, managing their resources with the same efficiency she'd once applied to her brother's household. But better. Here, she was partner, not servant. Essential, not invisible. "I have something for you," Lucian said one evening, a month after their arrival. He presented a slim wooden box, clearly old. Inside, nestled in velvet, lay a ring, silver set with a dark ruby that seemed to hold its own light. "It was my mother's," he said quietly. "One of the few things I kept from my human life. I want you to have it." Marguerite's breath caught. "Lucian, I know we are already bound by blood and covenant." He took the ring, slipping it onto her finger with ceremony. "But I want this symbol as well. Proof that you are mine and I am yours, in every way that matters." The ring fit perfectly, warm against her skin. Through the bond, she felt his vulnerability. This was the last piece of his humanity, given freely. "I will treasure it," she whispered, "as I treasure you." They made love that night with the tenderness of new discovery and the passion of certain devotion. The bond amplified everything, his reverence, her joy, the profound recognition that they had found in each other what centuries and decades of loneliness had denied them. Afterward, wrapped in blankets before the fire, Marguerite traced the planes of his face. "Do you regret it?" she asked. "Binding yourself to someone mortal? You could have found another vampire, someone who—" "You are the only person I have ever wanted this completely," Lucian interrupted. "Mortal or immortal, you are everything. Do not doubt that." She kissed him instead of answering, and the bond sang between them, whole and true and unbreakable. Outside, Scottish winds howled around their stone tower. Inside, the vampire king and the woman they said was too old for love built a life from exile and devotion. And for a time, they were perfectly, dangerously happy. Chapter 9. The Order's Judgment. The attack came on their third month in Scotland. Marguerite woke to Lucian's alarm screaming through the bond, not fear, but cold, tactical awareness. She dressed quickly, finding him at the tower window, staring down at the courtyard where a dozen figures in the Order's dark cloaks had assembled. "More than last time," he said grimly, "and better prepared. I smell silver and consecrated herbs. Can we escape?" "Not without fighting through them." His jaw tightened. "They have positioned themselves to block all exits. This is not a hunt. It is an execution." The gray-haired hunter from Blackthorn Estate stepped forward, his voice carrying in the pre-dawn stillness. "Lucian Ashford, you have violated the covenant of shadows by corrupting a mortal woman. Surrender yourself for judgment, and she may yet be saved." "Saved from what?" Marguerite called down before Lucian could stop her. "From being loved? From finally mattering to someone?" "From damnation," the hunter replied. "The creature has bound you through unnatural means. We can break the bond. Painful, yes, but it will free you from his influence." "I do not want freedom from him." The hunter's expression hardened. "Then you are lost. We will destroy you both." Lucian pulled her back from the window. "We can hold them off for a time. The tower is defensible and I have preparations." He stopped, sensing something through the bond. "Marguerite, what are you thinking?" She met his eyes, her mind racing with desperate calculation. "The Order believes you corrupted me, that I am a victim. You are not. But they believe I am." She gripped his arms. "What if I went down there? Alone? Pretended to want rescue?" "Absolutely not." His refusal was immediate and absolute. "I will not use you as bait." "They will not expect me to defend you," Marguerite continued urgently. "They think I am some poor, befuddled old woman under a vampire's thrall. Let them keep thinking that. Let me get close. And then what? You cannot fight them, Marguerite. They will drag you away, break the bond, and destroy me at their leisure. Unless I weaken their formation first." She pulled away, moving to the chest where Lucian kept his emergency supplies. Blessed weapons to use against other immortals. Silver blades that could harm vampires. You said you have preparations, contingencies. Tell me. He stared at her, conflict warring across his face. This is madness. This is strategy. She found what she was looking for. Small glass vials filled with clear liquid. What is this? Holy water, ironically enough, concentrated. It would burn vampire flesh, but on humans, it is harmless. His eyes widened as he understood her plan. Marguerite, no. Teach me how to use it, quickly. For a moment she thought he would refuse. Then, through the bond, she felt his resignation mixing with fierce pride. His remarkable, impossible woman was going to war. If you do this, he said quietly, you must be convincing. They cannot suspect until it is too late. Then tell me how to appear helpless. They planned quickly, desperately. Marguerite hid 3 vials in her sleeves and 1 in her bodice. Lucian gave her a silver knife, small enough to conceal. They reviewed the tower's defenses, where he would position himself, how he would strike when the moment came. I love you, she said as she prepared to descend. If this fails, it will not fail. He kissed her fiercely. Because we are too stubborn to let them win. But Marguerite, his voice cracked. Come back to me. Always. She descended the tower stairs alone, forcing her posture into submission, her expression into fear. The hunters watched her approach warily. Please, she called, letting her voice tremble. Please, you must help me. He has done something to me. I cannot think clearly. Come here, madam, the gray-haired hunter said, gesturing her forward. Slowly, we will protect you. Marguerite walked toward them, each step measured. The hunters relaxed incrementally, convinced of her helplessness. She was, after all, just a frightened old woman. Their fatal mistake. She reached the center of their formation, surrounded by a dozen armed hunters. The gray-haired leader reached for her, offering false comfort. Marguerite struck. The vial in her right hand shattered against his face. Holy water splashed, and while it did not harm him, the shock created an opening. She pulled the silver knife and drove it into his shoulder. Not fatal, but disabling. Then she was moving, smashing the second vial into the ground, creating a barrier of blessed liquid. The hunters roared in fury, converging. But their formation had broken, and in that moment of chaos, Lucian struck from above. He moved with lethal grace, enhanced by her permission through the covenant. Not to kill, though he could have, but to disarm, disable, scatter. Together they were devastating. Marguerite's strategic disruption and Lucian's immortal strength working in perfect concert. The fight was brutal and brief. When it ended, the hunters were fleeing into the dawn, their leader clutching his wounded shoulder and shouting promises of return. But Marguerite saw the fear in their eyes now. They had expected an easy execution. Instead, they had found coordinated resistance. They had found partnership. Lucian pulled her into his arms, his body shaking. You could have been killed, but I was not. She leaned into him, exhausted and exhilarated. We make a good team, you and I. A terrifying team. He buried his face in her hair. You magnificent, reckless woman. They stood together in the courtyard as dawn broke properly, blood on their hands and victory in their bones. The bond thrummed between them, stronger now, tested and proven. They will come again, Marguerite said. Yes. Lucian kissed her temple. But so will we. Again and again. However many times it takes. She turned in his arms, meeting his eyes. Then let them come. I am not afraid anymore. Neither am I, he said wonderingly. For the first time in 4 centuries, I am not afraid. They returned to their tower as morning light claimed the highlands, two souls bound by blood and battle, and a love that had proven stronger than judgment. Chapter 10. The Eternal Bargain. Winter settled over the highlands with quiet ferocity. The order did not return, though Lucien and Marguerite remained vigilant. Word reached them through immortal channels. The gray-haired hunter had reported their encounter, and the Order's council was debating the unprecedented nature of their bond. A vampire who maintained control through genuine partnership rather than domination. A human woman who fought alongside rather than submitted. It challenged their doctrine in uncomfortable ways. "They are watching us," Lucien said one evening as they sat before the fire. "Waiting to see if this is sustainable, or if I will eventually lose control and prove them right." Marguerite traced the silver ring on her finger. "Then we prove them wrong. Every day, for as long as it takes. It could be decades before they render judgment. Then we have decades." She leaned into his shoulder. "I can think of worse fates." His arm came around her, solid and sure. Through the bond, she felt his contentment, still touched with disbelief, even after months. That he had this. That she had chosen this. "I need to discuss something," Marguerite said carefully. "About the bond." She felt his immediate attention, his concern. "Are you suffering effects? Pain? Disorientation?" "No, the opposite." She sat up, meeting his eyes. "I am aging more slowly. You have noticed, yes?" "Yes." His expression was guarded. "The bond is changing you. Gradually." "How gradually?" He was quiet for a long moment. "The deeper the bond becomes, through repeated blood exchanges, through time and intimacy, the more you will take on immortal characteristics. Vivienne never progressed far because she kept distance. But you and I..." He touched her face. "We have no distance. At this rate, you will stop aging within a decade. Perhaps less. And then? Then you will be functionally immortal. As long as the bond holds, as long as I exist, you will endure." His thumb traced her cheek. "I did not tell you because I wanted it to be your choice. If you wish to maintain distance, reduce the blood exchanges, I will." "I want it," Marguerite interrupted. He stared at her. "You cannot possibly understand what you are choosing." "I am choosing you. For decades, for centuries, for however long we have." She took his hand. "I spent 43 years invisible and insignificant. You have given me purpose, partnership, love. Why would I accept that having an expiration date when immortality is possible?" "Because immortality is not gift, Marguerite. It is burden." His voice roughed with old pain. "You will watch the world change beyond recognition. You will lose everyone you knew. You will see civilizations rise and fall and understand how desperately insignificant individual lives are against that scope." "I will see it with you," she said simply. "That makes all the difference." Lucien pulled her into his arms, holding her with desperate tenderness. "You are sure?" "I have never been more sure of anything." He kissed her then, deep and claiming and full of promise. Through the bond, she felt his joy and terror and overwhelming love. He had not dared hope for this, had not let himself imagine she might choose eternity at his side. "Then I am the most fortunate creature to ever walk this earth," he murmured against her lips. They made love that night with new intensity, the understanding that this was not temporary adding weight to every touch. Lucien fed from her throat, and the bond deepened. She felt it like roots growing deeper, branches intertwining. They were becoming truly inseparable. Afterward, wrapped together in the darkness, Lucien spoke quietly. "I want to show you something." He led her to a locked room in the tower's highest level, a chamber she had not yet explored. Inside, the walls were covered in paintings, hundreds of them, spanning centuries. Landscapes and portraits and abstract studies, all rendered in skilled, melancholy detail. "You painted these," Marguerite said, awed. "It was how I marked time, how I processed the years." He moved among them, touching frames gently. "Every decade I would capture something that moved me, a way to remember that beauty existed, even for monsters." She studied the paintings, early ones dark and violent, later ones gradually lighter, softer. The most recent was a landscape of the moors near Blackthorn Estate at sunset. "When did you paint that?" "2 weeks before you arrived." He stood beside her. "I was thinking that it would likely be my last painting, that after Vivian died I would have no reason to continue marking time." "And now?" He smiled. Rare and genuine. "Now I want to paint you. Every decade, capturing how you change and do not change. I want to fill this room with you until the walls cannot hold any more proof of how extraordinary you are." Tears pricked Marguerite's eyes. "I am not extraordinary. You are to me." He pulled her close. "You saved me, Marguerite. Not through the covenant. Through your refusal to see me as monster. Through your courage and your choice, and your impossible decision to call me perfect when the world called me cursed." "Then we saved each other," she whispered. They stood together in that room of paintings, two souls who had found each other past the age and circumstances when love should have been possible. Outside, snow began to fall across the highlands. Inside, the Vampire King and his chosen bride planned the centuries ahead. "What should we do first?" Marguerite asked. "With immortality?" Lucian considered. "Travel. I want to show you the world, not as a fugitive, but as partner. Venice, Vienna, Constantinople. All the places I have hidden in, but this time with joy instead of despair." "That sounds perfect. And I want to commission a house for us, something beautiful. Where we can be ourselves without fear or judgment. With a library," Marguerite added, "an enormous library. And gardens, I contend? Gardens that will flourish for centuries." He kissed her forehead. "We will build a life, Marguerite, a real one, not defined by what we are running from, but by what we are running toward." "Each other," she said. "Always each other." The snow continued falling, blanketing the highlands in white silence. In their tower, the vampire and his beloved made plans for an impossible future, bound by blood and choice and love that had proven stronger than judgment, stronger than time, stronger than the world's insistence that she was too old and he was too cursed for such happiness. They had proven the world wrong, and they would continue proving it wrong for centuries to come. Chapter 11. Perfect. Forever. Spring came late to the highlands, but when it arrived, it brought transformation. The Order's judgment reached them on the vernal equinox, delivered by a young scholar rather than hunters. The message was brief. Provisional tolerance granted. The covenant between Lucian Ashford and Marguerite Ashford is recognized as unprecedented binding. Monitoring will continue. Violence will result in immediate sanction. "Tolerance," Lucian said, reading the letter with dark amusement. "How gracious of them." "It is enough," Marguerite replied. She was tending the garden she had started, small yet, but growing. Her hands were dirty, her hair escaping its pins, and she had never been more beautiful to him. "We do not need approval, only enough space to exist. You are wise beyond your years. I have excellent teachers." She straightened, pressing a hand to her lower back. The gesture was still human, still mortal, though he could sense the changes accelerating. Another year, perhaps 2, and age would stop claiming her entirely. They had settled into remarkable domesticity. Lucian had begun painting again, portraits of Marguerite working in the garden, reading by firelight, laughing at something he had said. She had taken over management of his various properties and investments, her practical mind bringing order to centuries of neglect. They were, improbably, happy. "I received a letter from Constance," Marguerite mentioned one evening over dinner. "My brother is ill. She asked if I might visit." Lucien looked up sharply. "Do you want to?" I think I do." She met his eyes. Not to return to that life, but to see him. To perhaps make peace before he is gone. "Then we will go to London." "You cannot. The city is dangerous for you. Where you go, I go." His tone brooked no argument. "We will take precautions, stay in shadow. But I will not have you face your family alone." They traveled south as spring deepened into summer. London was as Marguerite remembered, crowded, dirty, overwhelming, but also strange now. She had changed too much to fit back into its narrow expectations. Her brother barely recognized her. "Marguerite?" He struggled to sit up in his sickbed. "You look different. Younger, somehow. Healthier." "Country air agrees with me." She took his hand, feeling the fragility of mortality in a new way now. "I am glad I could come." They spoke quietly of old memories, of their parents, of the years that had passed. Constance watched from the doorway, suspicious and confused by the transformation in her once invisible sister-in-law. "You have married?" she asked, noting the ring. "Yes. His name is Lucien. He sees me. Truly sees me." "You seem happy," her brother said wonderingly. "I do not think I ever saw you happy before." "I was not," Marguerite said honestly. "But I am now." He died 3 days later, peacefully. Marguerite wept, not from devastating grief, but from the quiet sadness of finishing a chapter. She had made her peace. The life she had lived before Blackthorn Estate felt like a story about someone else now. Lucien held her through the morning, steady and present. They left London as soon as propriety allowed, both relieved to escape the city's confines. "Where next?" he asked, as their carriage rattled north. "Anywhere." She leaned into his shoulder. "Everywhere. Show me the world, Lucien." And he did. They spent a year in Venice, living in a palazzo overlooking the canals. Lucien painted while Marguerite studied Italian and explored the city's labyrinthine streets. They attended masked balls where his supernatural nature went unnoticed among the theater and pageantry. They wintered in Vienna, where Lucien introduced her to other immortals, a careful, hidden society that existed in the margins of human civilization. Some were vampires like him. Others were different creatures entirely. Marguerite found herself fascinated by their stories, their strategies for surviving centuries. "You fit here," one ancient vampire told her approvingly. "Better than most mortals who attempt to walk among us." "I am not entirely mortal anymore," Marguerite replied and realized it was true. The bond had transformed her completely now. She no longer aged. Illnesses passed through her system in hours. She was becoming something new, neither fully human nor vampire, but a third thing created by their unprecedented bond. They commissioned a house in the Swiss Alps, remote but beautiful, with the enormous library Lucien had promised, and gardens that would eventually rival great estates. It became their anchor point, the place they returned to between travels. And always, every night, they reinforced the bond through blood and intimacy, and the profound emotional connection that made their covenant unbreakable. 20 years passed, then 50. Marguerite stood in their Alpine library one evening, now approaching what would have been her 93rd birthday. But she looked no older than 40, the age she had been when the bond began to change her. She would remain this age forever, suspended in the prime of life that others had told her was already past. Lucien found her among the books, reading by lamplight. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking?" he asked. That they were wrong, she said softly. Everyone who said I was too old, too plain, too late, they were all wrong. Yes. He kissed her temple. You were perfect. Are perfect. Will always be perfect. Because you see me that way. Because you are that way. He turned her in his arms. You saved a monster and loved him into something better. You built a life from exile and made it extraordinary. You proved that love is not bound by age or convention or the world's expectations. His voice roughed with emotion. You are the most remarkable creature I have encountered in 400 years, Marguerite, and I have centuries more to tell you so. She kissed him. Her vampire king, her impossible beloved, her choice. Outside their alpine home, stars wheeled through ancient patterns. Inside, two souls who had found each other past all reasonable hope continued building there forever. Too old for love? They had proven that love had no such limits, and they would spend eternity proving it again and again, perfect in each other's eyes, bound by blood and devotion and the simple, radical act of choosing each other against all odds, forever.